Key points. Middle East escalation. October is poised to be crucial for developments in the Middle East, particularly with Israel's expansion of its military operations from Gaza to Beirut and South Lebanon. The Israeli air raids have killed over 1,500 civilians, and the region awaits a potential ground invasion. Resistance to Israel's actions is expected to come from the Iran-led Axis of Resistance, including Hezbollah, Syria, and the Houthis, raising fears of an escalation, especially after Iran's missile retaliation following the assassination of key leaders. While Iran has threatened significant retaliation if attacked, its missile capabilities are yet to be tested on a large scale. A direct Israeli response is anticipated soon, potentially escalating the conflict. Impact on global economy. There are concerns that damage to the Gulf's oil infrastructure, particularly in countries allied with Israel, could severely disrupt the global economy. Even a temporary reduction in oil supply could lead to economic turmoil. Calls for de-escalation are increasing as the conflict threatens to impact not only the Middle East, but the global economy. Political developments in Pakistan. At home, Pakistani politics is also reaching a critical juncture in October. The Supreme Court overturned an earlier decision on floor crossing, allowing opposition members' votes to be counted, a controversial move due to its timing. This ruling could benefit the government in pushing through a proposed constitutional amendment that would create an executive-appointed federal constitutional court. This move is seen as an attempt to block Imran Khan's political resurgence and limit the influence of judiciary members perceived to be sympathetic to him. Protests and political mobilization. Imran Khan has called for protests against the amendment, with KP Chief Minister Ali Amin Gandapur leading demonstrators to D Chowk in Islamabad. Despite heavy police presence, the protests have not yet gathered significant momentum, though supporters continue to trickle in. The government's ability to pass the amendment is uncertain, as it requires a two-thirds majority in both houses of parliament. Should the government fail, more drastic measures may be taken in the coming days. October's volatility. October is shaping up to be a month of significant change, not just for Pakistan, but also for the Middle East. With the situation in both regions precarious, the events of this month could determine the political and regional landscape for years to come. Crux, simplified. October is a pivotal month for both the Middle East and Pakistan. Israel's military actions in Lebanon could escalate into a broader conflict with Iran, which would have global economic consequences, particularly for oil markets. In Pakistan, political tensions are high as the government seeks to push through a constitutional amendment that could limit Imran Khan's political future, leading to protests and uncertainty about the future political landscape. Both regions are poised for significant and potentially volatile changes. Key points. The judicial package controversy. The so-called judicial package introduced by the government is not a reform, but an attempt to dismantle the judicial system. The amendments proposed aim to weaken the independence of the judiciary and place it under government control. The changes are being framed as judicial reforms, but they are seen as a way to break the system of checks and balances that are crucial in a democratic setup. Violation of the constitutional balance. The Constitution defines clear roles for the parliament, executive, and judiciary. By altering the judiciary's role, the government risks creating an imbalance that undermines the trichotomy of power. The proposed amendments take power away from the judiciary, making it subordinate to executive control and eroding its ability to act as a check on the other branches of government. Threat to the Constitution. The Constitution of 1973 is seen as a social contract between the state and its provinces, representing the will of the people. The amendments threaten to dismantle this contract, which could have grave consequences for Pakistan's unity, especially given the ongoing unrest in several regions. Politicians who delivered the Constitution in 1973 are now the ones undermining it, acting undemocratically by trying to pass these amendments without open debate or public consultation. The time to speak out. The time has come for civil society and the public to speak out against these amendments. The government's attempt to push through unpopular measures without transparency goes against the principles of democracy. True reform should represent the needs of the people and protect the Constitution's integrity, not serve the interests of elites or political expediency. Crux simplified. The proposed judicial package threatens to dismantle the independence of Pakistan's judiciary and upset the balance of power defined by the Constitution. This move could weaken democracy by making the judiciary subordinate to the government. The public must speak out to protect the Constitution and demand reforms that genuinely serve the people's interests rather than those of political elites. Key points. Personal reflection on Lebanon. The writer shares memories of a 2009 trip to Lebanon, offering a personal reflection on the country's struggles, which are deeply intertwined with politics. The trip started with a visit to a Hezbollah stall where the writer and a friend were warmly welcomed because they were from Pakistan, a country that, like Lebanon, has faced war and instability. The writer notes how Lebanese people, especially Hezbollah supporters, expressed sympathy for Pakistan's challenges. Hezbollah and Pakistani connections. Hezbollah members discussed Pakistan's political corruption, elite greed, military power retention, and subservience to global powers, drawing parallels with their own situation. However, the conversations were devoid of religious or sectarian undertones, focusing instead on national sovereignty and resistance. The writer recalls receiving Hezbollah merchandise and the subsequent reactions from friends who jokingly labeled them as terrorism supporters. Lebanon's cultural and social dynamics. The writer reminisces about everyday experiences in Lebanon, such as dining during Ramadan in a cafe that was fully operational, contrasting with the often stricter practices in other Muslim countries. On a trip to find a Palestinian refugee camp, the writer inadvertently ended up near the Israeli border, showing how pre-digital maps led to unexpected detours that were treated with humor and adventure. People and war. The writer recalls 3 individuals they met during the trip, including a bookshop owner who helped them understand Lebanese politics, a young jewelry designer whose family had been affected by violence, and feminist writer Jumana Haddad, who emphasized the importance of staying in Lebanon to continue the fight for change. Each of these individuals had been affected by war and had clarity on who the aggressor was, Israel. The shared experience of violence and the role of resistance tied their stories together. Reflections on resilience. The writer comments on how the Western media portrays Lebanon, often calling its people resilient. However, the writer argues that this resilience is not a compliment, but a necessity for survival in the face of relentless aggression and instability. The piece ends with a poignant reflection on the challenges of living in a world where survival often means forced resilience, especially in places like Lebanon, where resistance leaders are increasingly scarce. Crux simplified. The writer reflects on their 2009 trip to Lebanon, drawing connections between Lebanon's struggles and those of Pakistan. Despite the personal nature of their experiences, politics and war are ever present. Encounters with Hezbollah supporters, locals affected by violence, and resistance figures highlight the ongoing challenges in Lebanon, where survival is tied to forced resilience amid relentless aggression, especially from Israel. The piece critiques the romanticization of resilience, arguing that no one should have to be brave just to survive. Key points. Sirbaz Khan's historic achievement. Sirbaz Khan became the first Pakistani to scale all 14 of the world's peaks over 8,000 meters, completing the feat with his ascent of Tibet's Shishapangma in October 2023. His journey began in 2017 with Nanga Parbat, and 11 of his summits were made without supplemental oxygen, showcasing his extraordinary endurance and skill in extreme conditions. Sirbaz's accomplishment is even more remarkable, considering he started as a high-altitude porter and kitchen worker 11 years ago, demonstrating his dedication and resilience. Surviving and returning after an avalanche. Sirbaz's latest summit on Shishapangma was particularly courageous, as it came nearly a year after he survived an avalanche near the same peak. The avalanche had claimed the lives of 2 mountaineers, while 2 others went missing. His return to this dangerous route highlights his determination and bravery. Other notable Pakistani mountaineers. Pakistan's mountaineering community is growing, with Shehroze Kashif, Naila Kiani, and Samina Baig also making significant strides. Shahrozi is close to becoming the second Pakistani to scale all 14 highest peaks, having traveled with Sirbaz to Shishapangma's base camp. These mountaineers, regardless of age or gender, are proving that Pakistani climbers can compete with the best in the world. Need for sponsorship and support. Despite their accomplishments, Pakistani mountaineers face significant financial challenges, often struggling to secure funds for their expeditions. Sirbaz and others have had to seek sponsorships, which adds to the magnitude of their achievements. There is a call for both private and government organizations to step Crux simplified. Sirbaz Khan has made history as the first Pakistani to summit all 14 of the world's highest peaks, overcoming dangerous conditions and financial struggles to achieve this remarkable feat. Alongside fellow climbers like Shahroze Kashif, Naila Kiani, and Samina Beg, Sirbaz is leading Pakistan's mountaineering future, inspiring new generations of climbers. However, there is a pressing need for greater financial support from sponsors and the government to help them continue. Key points. Indian minister's visit to Pakistan for SCO. Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is confirmed to attend the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Council of Heads of Government meeting in Islamabad on October 15, 2023. This will mark the first visit of a senior Indian official to Pakistan since 2016. Though this is not a bilateral visit, Jaishankar's participation has drawn considerable attention due to the strained relations between India and Pakistan. Challenges in bilateral relations. Bilateral relations between India and Pakistan are at a low point, with no formal talks planned between the two during this visit. Mr. Jaishankar has emphasized that discussions on bilateral issues are not on the table. The atmosphere has been tense, as seen in the cold reception Pakistan's Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari received during his visit to India for an SCO meeting earlier this year, and the negative remarks made by Jaishankar about Pakistan at the UN General Assembly. Opportunities for dialogue. Despite the mistrust, the visit could still be constructive if both sides stick to the SCO agenda and avoid bringing up bilateral tensions. This might establish a positive precedent for future engagement. The visit could provide an opportunity for informal sideline discussions, potentially leading to confidence-building measures, such as the full restoration of diplomatic relations. Call for diplomatic dialogue. While expectations for any breakthroughs should remain low, the article suggests that dialogue remains the best path to peace. Both countries should focus on resolving outstanding issues through diplomatic channels, avoiding inflammatory statements that could further strain relations. Crux, simplified. Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar's visit to Pakistan for the SCO meeting on October 15 presents a rare opportunity for engagement between the two nations. Although bilateral talks are not scheduled, sticking to the multilateral agenda and engaging in sideline discussions could open the door for future dialogue. While significant progress is unlikely, the visit may help rebuild trust and ease tensions if both countries focus on constructive diplomacy. Key points. Intense political standoff. Islamabad has witnessed a standoff between law enforcement and the PTI, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, in recent days. The government's heavy-handed measures, including blocking mobile signals, deploying 6,000 personnel, using shipping containers as barricades, and making arrests, highlight the fragile state of political dissent in Pakistan. Government's response. The government's actions, including calling in the army for internal security, raise concerns about the proportionality of the response. Critics question whether the police are capable of handling political protests without military assistance, and whether the government's measures are justified. PTI's role in protests. The PTI's protests are centered around demands for Haqeeqi Azadi, true freedom, judicial independence, and a reduction in inflation. However, the party's confrontational history complicates the situation, with concerns about potential unrest. Timing of the protests. The protests coincide with Imran Khan's indictment in the Toshakhana case and Pakistan's hosting of the SCO summit, increasing pressure on the government. There are also rumors of government attempts to impose governor's rule in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa (KP), which could escalate the crisis. Comparison to 2014 protests. The current situation is reminiscent of the PTI's 2014 protests, which paralyzed Islamabad for 4 months. Both the government and PTI need to reassess their strategies, as continued confrontations hurt the public, disrupt daily life, and damage political stability. Crux simplified. Islamabad faces renewed political unrest as the government's heavy-handed response to PTI protests, coupled with PTI's confrontational approach, raises concerns about the suppression of democratic rights. While the protests are focused on freedom, judiciary independence, and inflation, the timing coincides with Imran Khan's indictment and the SCO summit. Both sides need to de-escalate tensions to prevent further harm to public life and political stability.